We've got the rand on a stronger footing this morning, so back below R7.10 against the dollar. And that's after trading very close to R7.20 yesterday. In the meantime, though, the euro is still very much under pressure.
Yes, good morning, Stephen. Absolutely. Look, I think that those concerns in Europe have by no means gone away, and I think that the rand will continue to track those movements fairly closely. But you know, we did see some encouraging manufacturing data out of China this morning, and that's probably encouraged the rand bulls to a certain degree. But for all intents and purposes, I think this rand is really stuck between a 7 and a 7.20 range. But I think the bias is for an upward breach of that to levels closer to 7.30, 7.40, and that's because we really do believe that this sovereign debt concerns in Europe aren't going to go away. We've still got Portugal and Spain on the radar screen, Italy as well, Belgium. There's a number of countries and a lot of contagion fears. And in that kind of environment, I think the dollar is going to remain fairly firm. As you said, the euro is going to remain fairly weak. And for that reason, I don't think the rand is going to be able to strengthen considerably against the dollar. Rather, it's probably vulnerable to broad-based dollar strength as a result of the dollar's perceived safety.
Of course, we did have some data yesterday. Trade balance coming through for October. Larger than expected deficit of 3.2 billion rand. I think the market was looking for a figure of about 2 billion. That follows a bit of a surprise surplus in September. This didn't seem to have much impact on the rand, though.
It didn't. It was conducive to a bit of rand selling in the early part of the session, but I think that the bottom line is that the strong rand environment is definitely starting to come through now, and we're likely to see this trend continue going forward. The rand is in our opinion overvalued on for example, a purchasing power parity metric by around 10%, and you know, if we couple that with sluggish global demand, specifically out of the European region, then we could see a renewed widening of that current account deficit. And of course, that places the rand in a vulnerable light from an overall balance of payments perspective, especially if capital inflows start to dry up. We've seen strong inflows into our bonds and equities, but if they start to dissipate at a time when the current account is widening, then the rand could be quite vulnerable, as I say, to those balance of payments issues.
We also had VAT receipt numbers out yesterday. What sorts of impact did they have on the rand? How were they viewed by the market?
Well, we've seen tax receipts now starting to slow down. We saw some strong growth during the World Cup, specifically those VAT receipts, but we started to see a bit of a moderation. We're still looking to probably undershoot government's original budget deficit by some margin, and in fact we might even undershoot the medium-term budget estimate. But what we've got to draw out of this is the fact that if government doesn't have vast amounts of tax overruns, then it's going to be difficult for them to take those tax overruns, deposit them with the Reserve Bank, and in so doing increase reserve accumulation. So, you know, if we look at the detail of the numbers, then I think we've got to say that it is probably rand positive, because it just limits the ability of the authorities to kind of stem rand strength through more aggressive reserve accumulation.
Well, Michael, you mentioned those PMI numbers out this morning coming in better than expected. We're getting our own PMI numbers coming out a little bit later this morning. October we were just below 50. September we were at 48.6. What's the expectation for the November reading? Do you think we could see positive moves there?
Well, they're expecting a 50.7 reading, which is just over that critical 50-point level. Of course, anything above 50 points represents an expansion within the manufacturing sector. And yeah, the market is hoping that we are going to move back into expansionary territory. But if we look at those trade figures yesterday, we look how strong the rand is, how weak global demand is. I think the risk is that we probably will undershoot those expectations, and in so doing place the rand in a vulnerable light from a GDP differential perspective. And I think, you know, that's one of the biggest risks for the rand. The rand has been benefiting hugely from the carry trade over the past 18 to 24 months. But if the carry trade fades and people start looking at growth, then South Africa is probably going to be at the back of the pack. And it's probably figures like manufacturing that we've got to watch a bit more closely to see what our growth prognosis is looking like. And we all know that the GDP print of the third quarter wasn't impressive, and if that continues, then as I say, the rand could be fairly vulnerable from a relative growth perspective.